figured I'd talk a little bit about the different time periods in World of Darkness, especially with Werewolf, because it's not only Werewolf the Apocalypse, which takes place in the modern day, it's also Werewolf the Wild West, which takes place in the mid-1800s, all the way to almost the 1900s, you know, after the Civil War and that sort of thing. And then there's Werewolf Dark Ages, which takes place pretty much in the time period of the Crusades. And of course, Vampire has its own equivalent, with Vampire the Masquerade being the modern one, Vampire Victorian Ages, and Vampire Dark Ages. But I'm mainly going to talk about Werewolf, the Werewolf time periods. See, because it's not only about the time period differences that we had in our history. It's not only about either playing like lords, ladies, and knights, or playing cowboys and Indians, or playing like, you know, car driving, computer using modern characters. There's all sorts of different things having to do with the history of the creatures themselves, whether it's vampires or werewolves. And something that, you know, is those are usually intertwined, you know, how somehow they always find a way of, okay, this historical event happened this way because there was actually behind the scenes stuff going on with vampires and werewolves and whatnot. And I really like those. Those are great stuff to read about in source books and that sort of stuff. It's not really that important, you know, if you're playing a game that's set in the modern day, you know, the information of knowing that, you know, that, you know, when Romans invaded the British Isles, that was vampires invading, you know, the lands of werewolves and stuff like that. You know, you won't really need that information that much, but it's really juicy stuff to read if you're interested, and that's why, you know, World of Darkness source books sell so good, because, you know, the people really dive into those stories and really get pumped for that. And in Werewolf the Dark Ages, something that makes it differ from the other werewolf games is the fact that during this time, whenever werewolves would mate with humans or wolves and would attempt to have werewolf children, that would most likely always succeed. And there were a lot of werewolves back then. Back in those days, you know, like 1,000 years ago, there was a lot of werewolves running around, and because there was no shortage, the werewolves were going a lot into war with each other. You know, it's always been this little theme with the tribes, that the tribes are very regional. You know, Get Fenris are Scandinavian and Germanic. You know, the Silver Fangs are from Russia. How the Fiannas are the Celts, and how the Black Furies are Greek, and all these sort of different regional tribes. And wouldn't you know it, in that time in history, those regions were at war with each other, and at that time, because of that, a lot of the tribes would be going to war with each other as well. You know, tribes like, you know, Get Fenris, the Scandinavians going into the British Isles to fight against the Fiannas. You know, there's vast amount of history between the Celts and the Vikings, and, you know, that's been incorporated into, you know, the history of the werewolves, and that is why to this day Fiannas and Get Fenris still hate each other, because werewolves are really, they have a really big heart-on for lineage and the prestige of your breed and your family history and that sort of stuff. So they still hold on to that sort of stuff that took place 1,000 years ago. so yeah, that's something that's really interesting to me. That the worm and the weaver are not yet, you know, that big of a. They are not the main threat. If you want to make like you know, the progress of the human world has not come to that sort of a stage yet where it poses any kind of threat to Mother Nature. So that is not really a threat. What is a threat is another 9-foot-tall badass with silver-coated talons ready to rip your throat open. You know, that's that's your main concern when it comes to threats and surviving. So in Werewolf the Dark Ages, one of the things that I've talked about before is something that you could easily or you almost should implement in this, and that is to have all the players be of the same tribe. That would knit them very closely together. That would make them have common goals. It would make them have all sorts of things that would unite them. And it's not that the tribe is the most distinct feature you can make a character have, because you can all be of the same tribe and still be extremely unique with your different roles and different auspices and breeds and character personalities and nature's demeanors, all sorts of different things that you can implement, and of course any sort of personality features you can just come up with yourself, of course. And that's basically, what I like about that setting is the fact that the tribes are butting heads, and members of your tribe need to come together to face the foe that is other werewolves. In Werewolf Wild West, that already has kind of gone into the future from Dark Ages so much that European tribes have now migrated into the New World, into America, and in America they already have had their own werewolf tribes. Tribes like the Uktena and Wendigo and also Stargazers are introduced. There are a lot of tribes that have died in the past. The Croatans were a Native American tribe that perished in a conflict before this game's time period, basically during the time when the Europeans migrated into the Promised Land, into the New World. Was that a Freudian slip? Then there was, the White Howlers who died a little bit before this time, and Stargazers are still alive here, but no longer in here. Stargazers are, an Asian tribe of these very Zen type of werewolves. But yeah, in this one, not only did the white European tribes migrate into America, but they brought with them the Black Spiral Dancers, and they have brought with them the technology of Europe. They have brought with them steam engines. They have brought with them all sorts of innovations that are basically Weaver technology. These are tools that humanity has come up with due to the influence of the Weaver. And at this time, werewolves are not even sure yet if Weaver has gone mad. They are not sure why Worm's minions roam freely everywhere. At this time, there is very little certainty about this. There is a lot of theories being thrown around in this, and there is a... The foe in this is not the other werewolves themselves. It's, of course, Black Spiral Dancers have now been brought up and they are now running amok, but also they have brought about this great entity called the Storm Eater. And the Storm Eater is a powerful worm bane that swallowed a very powerful Weaver spirit, and like two black holes coming into each other, they just swallowed each other up and just became this huge threat. And that is something that has had manifestations and the different kind of threats in the world of this time period, and that's where most of the threat comes from for the werewolves. And I really like it. It's kind of fun to have. This is the only one where you have this clear-cut bad guy that is so powerful that beginning level characters, they have no chance against it. In the book of the... there are some supplement books for this where they describe how they eventually battled... How they eventually battled the Storm Eater, and the Storm Eater is also mentioned in the Book of the Wild. How basically it took 12 septs to come together, 12 communities of werewolves to come together and put all their efforts together to destroy it. And I just really like it. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, we come into Werewolf the Apocalypse. Now, this is in the modern day, and in the modern day, the Stargazers, like I said, have already perished. But also, werewolves are born very, very rarely. When werewolves and humans, or werewolves and wolves, try to procreate, it is very rare that a werewolf will come out of that. So in this time period, werewolves cannot afford to wage war against each other because of their short numbers, and also because the influence of the Weaver has been escalating in incredible amounts, and also the influence of the Worm due to those, that progress has also, spurned out from the ground and is poisoning everything. And the werewolves no longer can afford fighting each other constantly, and they have banded together more than before in the past and fight the forces of the Worm and the Weaver to the greatest extent that they can. And the time of the apocalypse is nearing. When werewolves in this time period go into the Umbra, they can see the red star in the sky, which is the eye of the Worm, which marks the end of all things. The apocalypse is coming, and there's a source book like Gehenna is for vampire about their version of the end times. There is also a book for werewolf about the end times where they describe how it's all gonna end. And role-playing that, you're gonna die at the end of it, but it's just this a massive, all-out, balls to the wall war campaign of how you want to go out. Basically, you're all gonna die eventually when this is over, but this is how you're gonna go out. I really like all the differences between all these, but there are some little things that kind of lock people into certain states. Like, if you would want to, like when Werewolf the Apocalypse was made, cell phones weren't, rampantly all around with people. This was made like in 91, or no, it was made in 93, if I remember correctly. So, cell phones weren't a thing. If you play Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, the PC role-playing game, one of the first things that is mentioned to you about, keeping your monstrous identity secret is that every asshole these days is running around with a cell phone camera in their pocket. That gives something to this setting that that was not there when this setting was created. Sometimes technology just runs up to you in that way. So, this is a very specific setting because of that. So, if you would want to run like a game that's set in the 1930s, you would have to change a lot of things in the setting book. Of course, you can do it, but, you would have to pay a lot of attention to what sort of canon things would not fit there and what sort of things would. Or you can run it in like the near future. I have nothing against going all sci-fi, because the source books, especially when you go to stuff like Weaver fetishes, those are plasma guns and fucking, all sorts of science fiction stuff, jetpacks and whatnot. So, it's not like it tries to, it's all serious, modern day, and that sort of thing. So, I'm totally for it to trying to like take Werewolf the Apocalypse and taking it to like science fiction realms, or taking Werewolf Dark Ages and completely turning that into a fantasy game, because the Dark Ages book has all sorts of villains in it, and when you start to think that, okay, this is a world where there's this secret society of werewolves, oh wait, there's also a secret society of vampires, also there's a secret society of mages, there's a secret society for changelings, for fae, there's a secret society for hunters, there's a secret society for this, and and it's all of a sudden it starts to seem like only like 20% of people in the world are actually normal people or something. So it's very easy to take something like Werewolf the Dark Ages and just turning that into outright fantasy. I have nothing against that, please. But something like, getting locked into a time period with this is the same with, for example, with Wild West. The main threat of this timeline is the Storm Eater. There is a specific time in history when the Storm Eater was defeated. Storm Eater is no longer an issue in the modern day. So, in that sense, if you want to play this game that's set like in the year 1903, the Storm Eater is already defeated, so of course you can do it, but again you need to pay attention to the canon storyline of, okay, what do I need to change? How does this affect this and that? Or if you don't want to follow that storyline, be my guest. And the same thing is with Werewolf the Dark Ages. If you want to run it before the Crusades, or you want to run it in a more, further into the Renaissance time period, just go ahead. But just pay attention to those little details. But yeah, that's my little take on the time periods. I enjoy them all very much. But I would have to say, since I'm a huge sucker for the Wild West theme and Weird West and all that stuff, Werewolf the Wild West is my favorite of all the time periods. Then comes Werewolf the Dark Ages, because it has that super cool idea of the tribes going to war with each other, the way those regions went to war with each other in history. And then it's Werewolf the Apocalypse. I usually mention Werewolf the Apocalypse as my favorite role-playing game, but when I talk about, werewolf, it's Werewolf the Apocalypse is the first thing that comes to people's minds. So if I say Werewolf the Wild West, or something, it's easier to just say I'm a big werewolf fan, because I like all of them. They all go like, before I go into any other setting, it's all of these three. So it's easier to say just werewolf than saying Werewolf the Apocalypse, Werewolf the Wild West, and Werewolf Dark Ages. Then comes, Inquisitor or Cthulhu Tech or Song of Ice and Fire or anything like that. So yeah, I like them a lot.